The Minutemen were forewarned of the approach of the British, and they first set about in removing as much munitions from the British path. The colonists gathered. Between 200 and 300 collected on the Common in Lexington, their goal to stop the British. Suddenly, a shot rang out. The British soldiers responded by firing on the American militiamen gathered there. 17 colonists were felled by the British bullets. If the British had retired at this point to Boston, the war might not have begun in earnest, but Gage insisted in forging on to Concord. By this time, militia from the surrounding area were gathering. British troops occupied Concord, and a detachment was sent to the North Bridge. On the far side of the bridge gathered large numbers of militia. The British in Concord set fire to some supplies. When the militia saw smoke in the sky coming from Concord, a cry went up not to allow the British to burn the town. The colonists then advanced on the British troops at the bridge. They started crossing the bridge as the British fell back. Then the British soldiers opened fire. 4 Americans fell, 2 were dead, and the Americans answered fire. 3 British soldiers fell dead, and 9 others wounded. British ranks broke, and the soldiers retreated to Concord. At noon, the British commander, Colonel Smith, decided his work in Concord was completed, and he could withdraw toward Boston. As he withdrew, militia began surrounding his troops. At Merriam Corner, on the road to Lexington, his men had enough. They opened fire on the gathering American militiamen. The Americans answered. American militia seemingly stood behind every rock, tree, and wall on the road between Concord and Lexington. They fired at the retreating British troops every step of the way. Just beyond Lexington, the British forces were rescued by a force of 1,000 reinforcements led by Lord Percy. The British once again advanced on Lexington, capturing the southern part of it and plundering homes there, until the mass of gathering militia became too great. They withdrew towards Boston. All the way they were harassed unceasingly by the Americans. As Percy, who was no great admirer of the Americans, stated, "Whoever looks upon them as an irregular mob will find himself very much mistaken, nor are several of their men void of spirit of enthusiasm, as we experienced yesterday, for many of them concealed themselves in houses and advanced within 10 yards to fire at me and other officers, though they were morally certain of being put to death themselves in an instant." The British were harassed until they crossed Charleston Neck, at which point the colonists realized that further pursuit would be suicidal. The day was over. 1,800 British regulars met some 4,000 Americans. The British had been forced to retreat, losing 65 soldiers with an additional 173 wounded. The Americans lost 49 dead and 46 wounded. The war was on. There was no turning back.